German soldiers shipped to the U.S. in 1944 expected punishment, starvation, and humiliation. Instead, they walked into a world of padded train seats, coffee served by porters, and a country untouched by bombs. So why did this radical clash between Nazi propaganda and American reality leave many questioning everything they believed? And what happened when they brought those lessons back home? Chapter 1. The Nazi POW Experience. It's late 1944, and the once invincible Wehrmacht is falling to pieces. German soldiers by the tens of thousands are surrendering to Allied forces rather than fight to the bitter end, especially if it means avoiding capture by the Red Army. Can't blame them. More than 1 million German POWs would die in Soviet hands. The Western Allies had a problem now. What were they to do with all these prisoners? Great Britain is overflowing with captives and begs the U.S. to help. So, in a move unheard of in previous wars, America agrees to ship a huge chunk of Germany's army across the Atlantic. By war's end, roughly 425,000 German POWs would be confined in nearly 700 camps across the United States. Virtually every state, 46 out of 48 states at the time, hosted POW camps on its soil. Small towns in the American Midwest and South suddenly found themselves playing host to captured Axis troops. The operation ramped up quickly. Starting in 1942, boatloads of Germans, many from Erwin Rommel's defeated Afrika Korps, began arriving in U.S. ports. By 1944 to 45, the flow became a flood. Up to 30,000 POWs per month were being shipped in on Liberty cargo ships. These transports were perilous. Some POWs nervously joked that their own U-boats might torpedo them en route, but most made it safely to America's shores. Upon landing at ports like New York or Hampton Roads, Virginia, the weary Germans got their first shock. Big, hot meals waiting for them right there on the ship and dock. After years of wartime scarcity, the last thing these men expected was an American welcome feast. Yet U.S. guards, following the Geneva Convention, served up hearty portions of meat, potatoes, and vegetables. More food in one sitting than some Germans saw in a week. One astonished prisoner later wrote that the substantial meals on arrival made him think being captured by Americans might not be the worst fate. But some were horrified by what the Americans might do to them. Before we move on to the next section, please don't forget to subscribe if you've liked the video so far. Chapter 2. Hateful Americans? Still, many POWs were terrified as they disembarked, unsure what lay ahead. Nazi propaganda had filled their heads with gruesome tales of Allied captivity. 17-year-old Heinrich Henry Roux, captured in France, recalled arriving at a cold Hoboken, New Jersey pier in the winter of 1944, convinced the Americans were about to do something horrible to him. The first order of business was delousing and disinfecting the prisoners. So U.S. personnel shaved the Germans' heads and told them to strip for a shower. Henry and his comrades shivered in fear. Some wondered if the shower was a cruel trick like the gas chambers they'd heard about. Now the fear came back. What are they going to do? Henry remembered thinking. But instead of poison gas, warm water cascaded down. It really was just a shower, part of a thorough, humane processing to prevent disease. The Germans were given clean GI uniforms to replace their dirty field gray ones. Far from being tortured or mutilated, as their officers had warned, one Nazi rumor claimed Americans would castrate POWs on capture. These men were being scrubbed, fed, and clothed. Can you imagine the relief these young men must have faced? Moments later, the dazed POWs were herded onto trains that would carry them deep into the American heartland. As the locomotive rumbled out of the harbor, many of these young soldiers still expected to see scenes of devastation outside their windows. After all, Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda minister, had told them America was in ruins. its cities supposedly reduced to rubble by German V-2 rockets and Luftwaffe raids. Henry Roux certainly believed those stories until the doors opened and reality smacked him in the face. What he and thousands of fellow prisoners witnessed upon arriving in the USA was beyond anything they imagined. The real shock of their lives was just beginning. Chapter 3: Peanut Butter Revelation. The Germans were stunned. This man was black, yet he treated them kindly and with respect. More on that in the next chapter. As Pavel admitted, being offered food as though we were human beings made them forget a lot about their pent-up hatred. The food itself was yet another shock to the system. Henry Roux remembered being fed properly, good food, not enough, but food we never had before, on that cross-country journey. Many Germans got their first taste of iconic American chow, fluffy white bread for sandwiches, apple pie in some mess halls, and most curiously, peanut butter. Yes, peanut butter, that sticky staple of American childhood, was an exotic revelation to Germans. They'd never seen it back home. Nuts were a luxury in wartime Europe, and most took an instant liking. Henry became so enamored with peanut butter that it became his favorite. Other POWs later joked that you could practically convert a German to democracy with a jar of Skippy. In fact, U.S. camp menus were deliberately generous. Prisoners enjoyed 2,000 plus calories a day, even more if they worked, including occasional delicacies and rich desserts. Compared to the meager 1,500 calories a day a German soldier subsisted on at the front, it's no wonder some POWs started gaining weight once in America. The shock value of America, its wealth, its efficiency, and its surprising kindness, was sinking in. And the surprises would keep coming as the Germans settled into their new temporary homes behind barbed wire in the American heartland. Chapter 4: Camp Life. Want to understand the world better? Start with history and subscribe to our channel. Upon arrival at their assigned camps, German POWs discovered that daily life in America was shockingly tolerable, even comfortable by wartime standards. The United States, abiding by the Geneva Convention, went to great lengths to treat captives the same as its own GIs. Camps featured military-style barracks with clean bunks and regular hot showers. POWs received medical and dental care identical to that given to U.S. troops. But then, it came time to work. Under strict guidelines, no war-related industries, and officers could refuse work, most German prisoners were soon working alongside American civilians in low-risk industries. They earned a modest wage of 80 cents per day, credited in camp scrip, for their efforts. In practice, this meant tens of thousands of Germans were sent out each day to farms, orchards, sawmills, canneries, rail yards, and factories in the vicinity of their camps. In California, POWs picked oranges and walnuts. In Washington and Oregon, they cut timber. In Texas, they harvested sugar beets and even stuffed olives in canneries. Up north, POWs helped pack kosher meat in New Jersey, an irony not lost on them. And in the Midwest, they brought in critical crops. Nebraska alone had 23 POW camps and utilized about 12,000 German prisoners to tackle farm labor shortages. At harvest time, you might see columns of German soldiers in work overalls stacking hay or picking corn on American family farms. In Kentucky, POWs proved to be a literal crop saver. Their toil in the tobacco fields was credited with rescuing the state's 1944 tobacco harvest. Guards escorted work details to job sites each morning, but security was often relaxed. In many cases, the prisoners were seen as unlikely to escape, and indeed, very few made serious attempts. Think about it. Where would they go? A German escapee in the middle of Iowa with no money and limited English stuck out like a sore thumb. In fact, of the hundreds of thousands held, only 2,827 POWs ever attempted escape, and nearly all were recaptured within a day or two. Only one German POW in the entire war remained unaccounted for. A man named George Gardner, who slipped away from a New Mexico camp in 1945 and successfully lived under a false identity in America for 40 years. Apparently, he liked life here so much he never went home. He married an American woman and eventually revealed his story in 1985. But aside from that singular case, escaping was rare because, frankly, life in the camps was often easier than life in wartime Germany. Chapter 5. Shattered Propaganda. Amid routine work in captivity, real relationships grew between German POWs and Americans. Curiosity became respect, friendship, even love. In countless towns, farm families knew their prisoners by name. In Trigg County, Kentucky, the Broadbents hired about 20 Austrian and German POWs. Strict rules softened into Sunday services and a shared 1944 Christmas of carols, foods, and small gifts. Many bonds lasted for decades through letters. In Tennessee, a cornflakes box held over 400 POW letters from 1946 to 1976, brimming with gratitude. One writer, Willy Müller, urged nations to live in peace and respect as neighbors. The most striking romance joined Black Army nurse Eleanor Powell and German medic Frederick Albert, who married in 1947 despite Jim Crow taboos. A few POWs wed locals after repatriation, and by the 1950s, thousands returned to the U.S., drawn by friendships and a changed view of their former enemy. In a war defined by brutality and division, how did a nation rebuild and unexpectedly humanize even its enemies? Let us know in the comments below. Here's another video history buffs enjoyed watching. Goodbye for now.